Part 4. You will hear an archaeology professor giving a lecture on an ancient Saharan civilization known as the Garamantes. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning. Today we are turning our attention to the African continent, specifically the Sahara Desert, to look at a fascinating and historically misunderstood civilization, the Garamantes. Up until the late 20th century, the archaeological consensus regarding the Garamantes was largely dismissive. Because they lived in one of the harshest desert environments on Earth, modern historians assumed they lacked permanent settlements and functioned entirely as nomads, wandering the dunes in search of grazing land. This misconception was heavily influenced by the writings of their contemporaries, the Romans. In Roman literature, the Garamantes are rarely mentioned with any respect. Instead, ancient texts usually categorize them simply as a nuisance, pesky raiders who occasionally harassed the southern borders of the Roman Empire, rather than a genuine military threat. However, modern excavations have completely overturned this narrative. We now know they were highly advanced engineers. Beneath the Sahara lies a massive aquifer, fossil water trapped deep underground from a wetter prehistoric era. To access this, the Garamantes didn't just dig traditional wells, they engineered an astonishingly complex system of underground tunnels. These subterranean channels, some stretching for miles, utilized gravity to bring water to the surface without it evaporating in the intense heat. This ingenious irrigation fueled a thriving agricultural society. While they did grow wheat and dates, botanical analysis of the soil indicates that the most crucial staple of their diet and their most widely cultivated crop was actually barley. This agricultural surplus supported true urban centers. Their capital, Garama, was a sprawling metropolis. You might expect desert architecture to rely entirely on sun-baked mud brick, and while domestic houses used this material, their monumental architecture, the grand structures at the city's heart, were actually constructed from precisely cut stone. The level of sophistication in Garama was truly remarkable. In fact, a team of British archaeologists were stunned to unearth the foundations of large-scale public baths. The presence of such a water-intensive luxury in the middle of the Sahara demonstrates an incredible mastery over their environment. Turning to their economy, the Garamantes were the masters of trans-Saharan trade. They acted as the vital middleman between sub-Saharan Africa and the Mediterranean coast. They traded heavily in local resources, exporting carnelian, a type of semi-precious gem, as well as immense quantities of salt, which was highly prized by the Romans for preserving food. To manage this vast trade network, transport was key. We have found rock art depicting them riding in horse-drawn chariots, which they likely used for local travel and warfare. However, for the grueling long-distance trade caravans, they depended almost exclusively on camels, as these animals could survive weeks without water. So, what led to the downfall of such a resilient society? For centuries they thrived, but their survival depended entirely on a finite resource. By the 4th century AD, they had pumped so much water out of the aquifer that the water table began to drop dramatically. Their underground channels gradually ran dry, leading to widespread agricultural collapse. While the Roman Empire was crumbling to the north due to invasions, the Garamantes met a different fate. It wasn't war or disease that wiped them out, but rather a shifting climate that made their highly engineered way of life impossible to sustain. That concludes our overview. Next week we will...
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers.